A police officer humiliates a young black boy by confiscating his prosthetic leg, unaware of the powerful family backing him. What began as a shocking act of discrimination quickly spirals into unforeseen consequences as the truth comes to light. Subscribe to our channel to follow the full story and leave a comment to let us know where you're watching from. Liam, a 12-year-old black boy, loved his afternoons at the park near his home. It was a place where he could play freely, enjoy the fresh air, and temporarily forget the stares he often faced due to his prosthetic leg. The park, with its green trees, birdsong, and peaceful atmosphere, was where he felt free. Today, he was with his best friend, Max. Max was the friend who brought him joy and confidence. He never looked at Liam with pity or curiosity, but saw him simply as Liam. The two boys were strolling along the path covered in golden leaves, laughing and sharing school stories. Liam laughed, immersed in joy, feeling the cool breeze and warm sunlight on his face. But his happiness was cut short when, from afar, he noticed a tall man in a police uniform standing at the entrance, his gaze cold and stern. The officer looked directly at Liam, scanning him from head to toe, with a lingering stare at his prosthetic leg. Liam's heart raced. His breath tightened as the officer started walking toward him and Max. For a moment, he thought he could ignore it and keep walking, but the officer's piercing gaze seemed to pin him to the ground. Sensing the change in Liam's expression, Max turned to the officer, a look of surprise and discomfort on his face. The officer stopped in front of Liam and said coldly, "Let me see your ID." The boy was shocked. How could a 12-year-old even think to carry ID while just playing at the park? His heart pounded, his eyes bewildered as he stammered, I don't have any ID. I'm just here to play." The officer frowned, his cold gaze growing harsher. He paused, staring at Liam's prosthetic leg before asking suspiciously, "And where did you get that leg? Do you have any paperwork for it?" Liam was horrified. He'd never met anyone who asked such strange questions. That prosthetic leg was a part of him, a part of his life that he'd learned to live with. But now, an adult, a police officer, no less, was demanding he prove its legitimacy, as if he'd done something wrong just by having it. Liam looked at Max, his eyes filled with fear and confusion. Max immediately stood by his side, gripping Liam's hand protectively. "He doesn't need to prove anything. We're just walking here," Max said firmly. But the officer only smirked, as if Max's words were meaningless. "This is a security matter," he said coldly, and added, "If you don't have paperwork, I'll have to take the leg for inspection." Liam was stunned, terror and humiliation flooding his heart. "You can't take my leg," he stammered, his voice trembling. But the officer paid no attention to Liam's words. He bent down, starting to unfasten the straps of the prosthetic leg, ignoring the boy's panic. Everything unfolded like a nightmare. People around began to notice, some taking out their phones to record. Liam felt every gaze on him, watching as he was stripped of a part of himself in the park. Max tried to protect him, but he was just a child, unable to stop the adult's cruel action. Liam stood there, his right leg taken, now unable to stand steadily, tears streaming down his cheeks. He didn't want to cry, didn't want to show weakness, but the humiliation and helplessness overwhelmed him. It felt like everything precious he had tried to protect was stripped away in a brutal moment, laid bare before friends and strangers. As the officer walked away with his prosthetic leg, Liam just stood in silence, heart heavy with pain and powerlessness. Max stood by his side holding his hand, his own eyes filled with anger and sorrow. In that moment, Liam felt deeply hurt, not only physically, but also emotionally. When Liam got home, he collapsed into his father, David's arms. Max had tried to comfort him on the way home, but the humiliation, helplessness, and insult weighed on him like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. He was angry and heartbroken as he recounted everything, sometimes pausing to catch his breath as his voice choked and his eyes reddened. David listened patiently, each of Liam's words like a knife to his heart. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. Anger boiled within him, not only at the officer's cruel behavior but also at the injustice Liam had suffered. He'd always tried to help his son feel confident and proud of himself. But now, he realized Liam had endured an unimaginable shock. "Liam, you did nothing wrong," David said, his voice warm but firm, his gaze full of determination. He knelt beside his son, placing a hand on his shoulder, trying to instill strength in him. "You didn't deserve to be treated this way. No one does, and I won't let this go." But Liam only sat there, his gaze sad, his hands shaking as he remembered the officer's cold stare and the helplessness he felt as his prosthetic leg was taken away. It felt like everything he'd tried to build his confidence, his pride in himself, had been shattered. The humiliation lingered, and he didn't know how to erase it. Seeing his son like this, David grew even more determined. He promised Liam he would do everything in his power to seek justice. "We won't stay silent," he said, his voice full of anger but steady. "I'll make sure that officer is held accountable for his actions, and you'll get your leg back, along with your dignity." Liam looked at his father, his tear-streaked eyes showing a glimmer of hope. He knew his father was always his greatest protector, but this time he sensed that his father wasn't just going to comfort him but would truly stand up for him and for justice. In that moment, amid the pain, he saw a glimmer of light, a belief that maybe things could change. That night, Liam sat in his room, his gaze hollow as he looked at the empty space where his prosthetic leg usually rested. Each time he touched his leg, he felt the pain and shame. The emptiness seemed to fill the whole room. He didn't know how to move past this, but his father's determined words began to plant a small seed of hope in his heart, a will that he wouldn't have to endure this alone. The next morning, as the early sunlight filtered through the window, there was a knock on Liam's door. It was David, and with him was James, a longtime family friend. James was an experienced journalist, always standing up for justice and exposing injustices. David had told him everything the night before, and he had come to see Liam. Seeing the warmth and empathy in James's eyes, Liam felt he could open up and tell the story once more. James listened carefully, his face showing anger and deep sympathy. He placed a hand on Liam's shoulder and said warmly, "You were very brave, Liam. Not everyone could go through something like that and still stand strong. And I want you to know that you're not alone in this. We'll fight this together." James's words were like a breath of fresh air, stirring hope and strength within Liam. He felt the unity and support from his family, from friends like Max, and now from James. He began to feel that he wasn't just a victim, but could stand against injustice, not just for himself, but for everyone who'd ever suffered like this. David looked at Liam and said, "You're not alone, Liam. We'll do everything we can to protect you and make sure that officer faces the consequences." In Liam's heart, fear and pain were still there, but for the first time since the incident, he felt strength from his loved ones and started to believe he could overcome this pain, that justice might be within reach. Liam sat there, feeling the strength and determination from his father and James. Their comforting words and promises lit a spark of belief in him that perhaps he wasn't just a victim, but could become someone strong, someone who dared to stand up against injustice. James looked into his eyes, his gaze firm yet compassionate, and said, "We won't let this fade away, Liam. This isn't just your story. It's the story of so many others out there who haven't had the chance to tell the truth." James's words shook him. Liam had never thought his experience could hold such significance, but seeing his father's resolve and the family friend's support, he began to understand that he was part of a greater fight for justice. He nodded, his eyes shining with determination. "So, what do we do, Uncle James?" he asked, his voice small but resolute. James smiled, a warm yet determined smile, as if he'd been waiting for this question. "I'm going to help you, Liam. I'll write an article telling your whole story, leaving nothing out. People need to know what happened, need to understand the injustice you've faced. We'll make it impossible for that officer and those who support him to ignore it." David placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his gaze gentle but filled with strength. "You've been so brave, Liam. Your Uncle James and I will be here to support you every step of the way." He paused for a moment, then continued. "This isn't just about getting your leg back. It's about protecting your dignity and making sure you're never treated unfairly again." That afternoon, in Liam's small room, the three of them sat together, planning and discussing. James took notes as Liam shared every detail, from the officer's cold look to the feelings of helplessness and fear when his leg was taken. He carefully recorded Liam's emotions, knowing that this story was about more than the incident. It was about the feelings Liam had endured. Every word Liam shared fueled James's resolve to bring the truth to light. To prepare the article, James decided to meet with witnesses from the park that day, people who saw the injustice and recorded the incident. He wanted to ensure that no one could deny the truth. Meanwhile, David contacted a lawyer to file an official complaint and protect Liam from any potential legal repercussions. Liam, although apprehensive about his story being made public, felt a rising sense of pride and determination. He began to understand that his story could have a broader impact, could change how society viewed people with disabilities and those who'd faced discrimination. For the first time, he saw himself not just as a hurt and timid boy, but as someone who could stand up for justice, not just for himself, but for many others. In the following days, James began writing the article, each line filled with anger and resolve. He didn't just describe the events, he emphasized Liam's emotions, the pain, the humiliation he'd endured so readers could deeply feel the injustice. When the article was published, Liam's story quickly spread, gaining public attention. Those who read it felt anger, empathy, and many began expressing their support for Liam. Liam's life began to change. From a quiet boy, he became the center of a wave of support and empathy from people everywhere. Friends at school, neighbors, and even strangers sent words of encouragement and support. However, alongside this support, there were opposing voices, even criticism from those who supported the officer, claiming Liam and his family were overreacting. The pressure from both sides grew heavier on him. David and James stayed close, encouraging Liam. David reminded him that though this was a difficult journey with much pressure, standing up for truth and justice was something everyone should strive for. James told Liam, "The truth will protect itself, Liam. Keep your faith strong. Your story is one that society needs to hear and understand." The media coverage grew, and with it, community reactions became more polarized. From an ordinary boy, Liam quickly became the focal point of a societal debate. He received immense support from those who empathized with his suffering. They sent letters, messages of encouragement, and shared their own stories, making Liam feel less alone. This support strengthened his faith in the path he'd chosen. Yet, he also faced harsh criticism from those who backed the officer. They argued that he and his family were making too big a deal, that the officer was merely doing his job. Some even said harshly that Liam was seeking attention and playing the victim. These comments hurt him deeply, and more than once he wondered if he'd been wrong to stand up to the officer. At school, Liam felt the change. Some friends distanced themselves, avoiding talking to him as if scared of being associated with a controversial issue. Occasionally, he heard whispers behind his back and mocking laughter. However, there were friends like Max who stood by him, encouraging and defending him against mean words. Max told Liam that those people were only afraid of the change he was trying to bring, and that he should keep going for what was right. When Liam told his father about the hurtful comments and disdainful glances he faced at school, David looked at him with determination, passing on his strength. "Son, when you stand up against injustice, there will always be people who disagree. But that doesn't mean you're wrong. You have the right to protect your dignity and speak the truth," David said, his voice gentle but full of conviction. James's article continued to draw attention, and others began to come forward, sharing their own stories of discrimination and injustice they had endured. These stories strengthened Liam's belief that his actions were justified. He realized his story was no longer just his own, but had become a symbol of a larger issue, of an injustice that many had endured in silence. Public pressure intensified as the media covered the incident more frequently. Debates erupted, not just on social media, but within the local community. Some organized protests in support of Liam, holding signs and slogans demanding justice and fairness. They stood in front of the police station, calling for the officer to be held accountable for his actions. Liam had never imagined his story could create such a wave, and a sense of pride mixed with worry rose within him. However, the more attention it received, the greater the risk and pressure on his family. Some extremists began sending threats to his house, warning the family to drop it if they didn't want trouble. One evening, David received an anonymous letter filled with harsh and threatening words. Liam saw the worry in his father's eyes, but David quickly reassured him. "We won't be intimidated. The truth is on our side, and I'll always be here to protect you." Whenever faced with hardship, Liam remembered his father's encouragement and the unwavering support of Max and James. He knew that he wasn't just fighting for himself, but for a whole community. His conviction grew stronger, and he began to see the importance of standing up, despite the pressure and danger. In the following days, Liam's family also became the focus of media attention. Reporters frequently appeared outside their home, hoping to interview and photograph the boy, brave enough to stand up for justice. At first, Liam felt frightened by the cameras and the crowd, but his father and James were always by his side, helping him stay calm and confident. David told his son that this was his chance to spread his message, to show people that anyone could stand up when faced with injustice. Liam gradually learned how to face the attention, realizing that it was an opportunity to let his story continue to spread and help others. He understood that, with the support of his family and those who believed in him, he could overcome every criticism and fear. He wouldn't let anyone make him abandon this fight. Although he had begun to feel more confident facing public attention, deep down, Liam still felt tired and occasionally confused by all the pressure he faced. Each day, he had to endure rumors, pity, and the constant eyes of everyone around him. At school, some classmates unabashedly looked at him as a curiosity, while others whispered as he passed through the hallway. The scrutiny and tension began to wear him down. One evening, after a long, stressful day at school, Liam sat quietly at his desk, staring into the empty space in front of him. He felt lonely, as if no one could truly understand what he was going through. In that moment, David entered the room, noticing his son's reflective posture. He sat down beside him, his gaze gentle and empathetic. "Liam, I know you're going through very difficult things," David began, his voice gentle but weighty. "Maybe you feel like everything is weighing you down, and sometimes you might wonder if everything you're doing has any meaning." Liam nodded, his eyes moist. "I just want my life to go back to the way it was before, like a normal kid. I don't want to be the center of everyone's attention. Don't want people to pity me because of my prosthetic leg or look at me like some accidental hero. I just want to be myself," he said, his voice choked. David gently patted his son's shoulder, his eyes full of love and understanding. "I understand, Liam. You never have to be anyone other than yourself. But sometimes circumstances put us in a position where we have a chance to make a difference. You have the right to protect your dignity and speak the truth. You're not just fighting for yourself, but for many others who've also faced injustice." Listening to his father, Liam began to feel a small glimmer of light inside. He remembered the letters of support from strangers, the stories they shared of the discrimination they had endured. He realized he was representing something bigger than himself, a voice for those who had fewer chances to be heard. David continued, "I know you're tired, and I also know that you don't always feel strong. But I'm here. Max is here, James is here, and all the people who have supported you are behind you. Whenever you feel weak, remember you have a large community beside you. You're not alone in this fight." Liam listened in silence, and every word his father spoke seemed to give him new strength. He understood that this struggle was not easy, but now he knew he had a greater purpose. He wasn't just Liam. He was a symbol of resilience and courage, a beacon of hope for those who'd suffered injustice. From that day on, Liam felt he could be stronger, and he was determined not to let judging eyes or harsh words make him hesitate. He continued facing tough days at school, with curious stares and rumors, but now he knew he was standing strong for something that mattered. James continued visiting the house, offering support to Liam and his family. He wasn't just helping bring Liam's story to light, but also becoming a friend and a mentor. He shared stories with Liam about people he'd helped, about cases of injustice he'd exposed throughout his career in journalism. Through these stories, James seemed to be imparting a message that the fight for justice was never easy, but always worth pursuing. One evening, as they sat around the kitchen table, James put a hand on Liam's shoulder and said, "Liam, you know what? What you're doing is very meaningful. You're not just changing your own story, but changing how society views people like you. Never let anyone make you feel weak or unworthy. The truth is your strength, and when you stand up for it, you're stronger than anyone could imagine." Liam sat quietly, taking in each of James's words, realizing he was no longer a wounded boy. He was someone who could make a difference, someone who could bring hope to others. He felt that, despite the difficult road ahead, he had enough support and love to keep going. The encouragement from his father and James helped Liam overcome the feelings of exhaustion and directionlessness. He knew that in this struggle, he had a large family beside him, people who believed in him and supported him unwaveringly. And now, instead of being afraid and avoiding challenges, he decided to face what lay ahead. He would bravely continue on his journey, not only for himself, but for everyone who needed him to stand up and speak the truth. After finding the strength within himself and the resolve to keep moving forward, Liam and his family devoted all their energy to pursuing justice. James didn't rest either. He continued his investigations into the police officer who humiliated Liam that day. What he uncovered left Liam and his family both astonished and outraged. This officer, Officer Harper, had a record of discriminatory and abusive behavior. James discovered that Officer Harper had been accused in multiple similar incidents, but most of the previous complaints had mysteriously disappeared. He met with other victims who had been mistreated by Harper simply for being different or part of a minority group. James recorded these stories, each one adding layers of pain and injustice, proving that Officer Harper had been shielded and enabled by the very system he served. When James shared these findings with Liam and David, they both felt the weight of it. Liam understood that what he had endured wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a much larger problem, a systemic issue where the misdeeds of some individuals were concealed and protected. This only strengthened Liam's determination, and he knew that he was not just fighting for himself, but also for other victims who had been silenced by fear. David, though concerned for his family's safety, stood firmly by Liam's side. He understood that they were now facing a more complex and dangerous battle. "Son, this isn't just about getting justice for you anymore. This is a fight to expose the truth, to end abuse of power and discrimination," David told Liam, his gaze steady. "And I will always stand behind you, fighting alongside you to the very end." As James's investigation continued to uncover more shocking details, the revelations spread widely through news articles. The community grew outraged and demanded government action. A surge of support for Liam and his family rose stronger than ever, calling on others who had suffered at Officer Harper's hands to courageously come forward. Human rights and anti-discrimination organizations began joining this fight, calling for a full investigation into Harper's past actions. However, as the truth began to surface, Liam's family also faced backlash from a group of Harper's supporters. Threats began to appear more frequently. One night, as the family was getting ready for bed, a stone suddenly smashed through their living room window, accompanied by a note filled with menacing words. David immediately called the police, but the worry grew deeper as they realized such actions might continue. Yet, Liam didn't let the fear deter him. He knew that the more people tried to stop him, the more it proved how important and necessary this fight was. He recalled James's words, "The truth is the greatest power," and decided not to back down. James dug deeper into his investigation, and soon he uncovered a critical piece of information. The prior complaints against Officer Harper hadn't disappeared by accident. There were signs that certain officials within the police department had intervened to erase or downplay allegations against Harper to shield him from accountability. These findings made James furious, and he knew he had to expose the whole truth so the public could understand how the system had enabled Harper. Liam and his family felt the gravity of the battle they were fighting. They weren't just up against an individual, but a system that had allowed discrimination and injustice to persist. Each evening, As he sat with his father and James, Liam no longer felt like a scared or confused child. He felt that he had grown, had a purpose bigger than himself, and that he could contribute to making a difference. James advised Liam and his family that standing up to expose the truth might lead to more difficulties and dangers, but he also emphasized, "Only by speaking up and exposing everything can we have a real chance to change anything. If we don't do this, how many more people will have to endure what you went through?" Liam listened to James's words intently, his resolve deepening. "I won't stop, Uncle James. I won't let people like Harper keep hurting others," he said, his voice small but firm. David looked at his son with pride and emotion. He saw in Liam a maturity beyond his years, a determination and strength that surprised him. "I'm so proud of you, Liam," he said, his voice low and filled with warmth. "Not everyone has the courage to do what you're doing." As the trial approached, Liam and his family felt the weight of the battle they had taken on. He knew this trial wasn't just a confrontation between him and Officer Harper. It was a fight against the injustice of a system that had protected wrongdoing for years. The pressure seemed unending, and he had to prepare for everything that was about to unfold. Each morning, when he went to school, Liam faced the curious stares and unfriendly attitudes of some classmates whose parents may have been influenced by conservative viewpoints or didn't understand his story. The whispers, the judgmental looks sometimes, made him want to turn back. But, remembering his father, James, and all the people who believed in him, Liam knew he couldn't give up. One day, walking down the hallway, he was stopped by Tyler, a classmate known for his troublemaking. Tyler looked at Liam with disdain, a mocking grin on his face. "So, you think you're a hero, huh?" Tyler sneered. "Just looking for attention. Who'd even believe your story?" Tyler's words stung, but Liam didn't want to be seen as someone seeking fame or labeled a hero. He just wanted justice and to reclaim his dignity. Taking a deep breath, he kept calm and replied, "I'm not looking for attention, Tyler. I just don't want anyone else to go through what I did." Tyler raised an eyebrow, scoffed, and walked away. But Liam felt he had grown in facing and speaking the truth. He was no longer the timid, fearful boy he once was. Instead, he realized he had become truly stronger, strong enough to move forward despite insults. Each night, Liam and his family sat together to prepare for the upcoming trial. His father, James, and the family's lawyer had gathered all the evidence and testimonies from Harper's other victims. They knew this would be a hard-fought battle, as Harper's side had hired a team of seasoned lawyers ready to use every tactic to defend him. James often encouraged Liam, reminding him that this trial was his chance to tell his story to the world. "You're not just standing up for yourself, Liam. You're showing society what really happened and letting other victims know they're not alone," James said, his eyes full of determination. In moments of practicing his testimony, Liam felt tense and nervous. He knew the trial wouldn't be easy, that Harper's lawyers would try every tactic to undermine his credibility. He was afraid of facing all the scrutinizing eyes in the courtroom and of recounting every painful detail. But seeing his father and James sitting there, their eyes filled with encouragement and pride, Liam felt a new strength rise within him. David often reminded his son that he was incredibly proud of him and that no matter the outcome, Liam had achieved something enormous. He had found his voice and had dared to confront injustice. "I've always known you have a special strength, Liam. The strength to do what's right, no matter how hard it is," he said, his voice low but full of emotion. One evening before the trial, Liam sat beside his father, holding his hand tightly. "I just hope that what I'm doing can change something, Dad. I want people like Officer Harper to be held accountable for what they've done." David looked into Liam's eyes, proud and resolute. "Son, what you're doing will leave an impact. You may not change everything overnight, but you've created a wave, a source of hope for those who have been hurt." The next day, as he entered the courtroom, Liam felt a tremendous weight. Everyone in the room seemed to be looking at him, some eyes filled with admiration, but not a few with doubt. Beside him were his father and James, their gaze steady and supportive, helping ease his worry. As he prepared to give his testimony, Liam took a deep breath. In that moment, he recalled all the encouragement and support he had received. He remembered why he had started this journey and the people he was fighting for. He knew that despite the difficulties, this was the right thing to do. Liam began recounting his story before the court, his voice clear and strong. He left out no detail, concealed no emotion. Each word seemed to etch into the silent courtroom, allowing everyone to understand the injustice he had endured. Although his voice occasionally trembled with emotion, he kept going, step by step, as an act of reclaiming his dignity and justice. When he finished his testimony, Liam looked directly at Officer Harper, his gaze unwavering. He didn't need to say anything more, as he knew that everyone in the room had heard the truth. In that moment, Liam realized he had achieved something incredibly significant. He had stood up, refusing to let injustice make him afraid. And, regardless of the trial's outcome, Liam knew he had won in his own way. He had found his voice and his strength. Immediately after, Officer Harper's attorney stood up, ready for the rebuttal. Liam took a deep breath, striving to stay calm as he braced himself for the challenging questions ahead. Harper's attorney, with a piercing gaze and sharp tone, began by trying to undermine Liam's story, attempting to portray him as just a kid seeking attention. "Mr. Thomas," the attorney began, his tone friendly but clearly strategic. "It seems you've gained quite a lot of attention since this incident occurred, hasn't it? Many people have expressed their sympathy, and you've even been featured in numerous articles. Would you say that this situation has been exaggerated simply to attract attention?" Liam took a deep breath, reminding himself not to be shaken by these questions. He looked up and replied in a strong voice, "I'm not looking for attention. I just want people to know the truth about what happened to me, and I don't want anyone else to go through that." The attorney raised an eyebrow but showed no surprise. He continued, attempting to poke holes in each detail, trying to make Liam's story seem less credible. "So, you believe a public servant who was simply doing his duty could be this wrong?" he asked, pausing as if implying Liam was just exaggerating everything. Liam didn't waver. He replied, his voice calm but resolute. "He wasn't just doing his duty. He humiliated me and made me feel like I didn't deserve to be treated like a person. And no one, not even a police officer, has the right to do that." Liam's answer left the courtroom silent. His father, sitting behind him, looked at his son with deep pride. David knew that not every child would have the courage to stand up for the truth like this, and in that moment, he felt that all the struggles they had gone through were worth it. When Harper took the stand to defend himself, the courtroom's tension rose. Harper, in his police uniform, tried to maintain his composure, but his gaze and body language revealed his defensiveness. He insisted that his actions were simply part of a security check, that the boy with the prosthetic leg looked suspicious and that he was just doing his job. But when questioned by Liam's lawyer about past accusations, about instances where he had treated others unjustly, Harper gradually lost his initial confidence. The testimonies of previous victims who had also suffered at his hands painted a clear picture of a man filled with prejudice and prone to abuse his power. Finally, Liam's lawyer, with a calm yet determined tone, asked the question everyone had been waiting for. "Officer Harper, isn't it true that your actions weren't about security, but were motivated by your personal bias against a boy who was different?" Harper froze, his face showing anger and tension. He and people like him always think they're special, that they deserve attention just because they're different. Harper blurted out in a moment of lost control, unaware that his words revealed the very bias they had aimed to prove. The courtroom fell silent, as if everyone had stopped breathing in that moment. Harper's words had laid bare the prejudice he harbored, making clear what Liam and James had tried to prove from the start, that this was not just a single wrongdoing, but the result of deep-seated bias. Finally, after the closing arguments from both sides, the court went into deliberation. Liam sat beside his father, feeling the anxiety rise but knowing he had done everything he could. He had spoken the truth, defended his dignity, and stood up for others. In the quiet moment of waiting, his father held his hand tightly, his gaze filled with pride and love. When the judge returned to the courtroom, everyone held their breath, waiting for the verdict. The judge, with a stern but empathetic expression, declared, "The court has considered all the evidence and testimonies from both sides. Officer Harper, your actions were not only an abuse of power, but also constituted systemic discrimination. The court finds you guilty of abuse of power and discrimination." A murmur rippled through the courtroom as the verdict was announced. Liam looked at the judge, feeling as though a massive weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He had secured justice, not only for himself, but for everyone who had been treated unfairly. His father hugged him tightly, and in his father's embrace, Liam felt that he had truly won. As he left the courtroom, Liam saw supporters gathered outside smiling and applauding him. James approached, placing a hand on his shoulder and saying quietly, "You did it, Liam. You made a real difference." Liam smiled, feeling both relieved and happy. He knew his journey was still long, but today he had taken an important step. He had stood up, refusing to let fear and injustice control him, and he had achieved justice. This wasn't just his victory, but an inspiration to those who had also been held down by prejudice and injustice. Leaving the courthouse, amid the applause and words of encouragement from everyone, Liam felt his heart fill with pride and a peace he had never known before. Seeing the smiles and nods of support from strangers, he knew that his story had deeply touched many, far beyond what he had imagined. In the days that followed, the media continued to report on the trial and Liam's victory. To many, this story was more than an isolated case. It became a symbol of resilience and courage. Liam received countless messages and letters from people everywhere, from those who had faced discrimination and from those who had remained silent before injustices for years. They thanked him for standing up, for inspiring them to find their own voices. Life for Liam began to return to normal, but he knew he had changed forever. Every time he passed by the park where the initial incident happened, he no longer felt pain or fear. Instead, he felt peace and a quiet pride. The painful memories had become a source of strength, and he now knew he was strong enough to face any challenge. One afternoon, as he sat in the park with his father and James, Liam suddenly proposed an idea. "I want to start an organization to support people who have been discriminated against, especially those with disabilities. I don't want to stop here. I want to help others too." David and James looked at him with encouragement in their eyes. David nodded, taking his son's hand, and said, "That's a wonderful idea, Liam. I'll always be by your side, no matter what you want to do." James smiled as well, pride evident in his expression. "You've come a long way to find your voice, and now you want to give others a voice too. That's truly admirable." With the help of his father and James, Liam began building his organization, one that would offer legal and emotional support to those who had faced discrimination. He wanted to create a community where people could share their stories, where no one had to feel alone in their struggle. The organization quickly gained attention and support from the community, from people who had experienced injustice and those who wanted to help create a better society. Every day, Liam received messages from people who had found empathy and hope through his story. They not only thanked him for standing up, but promised to continue the fight for justice and fairness. Liam knew this was a long journey, but he no longer felt afraid. He had found strength not only for himself, but also for a larger community. The following spring, Liam's organization held an event in the park, the place where it all began. He invited everyone to come and share their stories, experiences, and speak up together. As he stepped onto the stage, Liam saw the hopeful and determined faces of people who had endured and overcome injustice. In that moment, he felt the true meaning of his journey. "A year ago, I felt small, lost, and voiceless," Liam began, his voice warm and confident. "But today, I stand here not just for myself, but for all of us, those who have been hurt, who have felt the sting of injustice. Today, we have a voice, and no one can take that from us." The crowd erupted in applause, and in that applause, Liam felt a deep happiness. He knew this was only the beginning, that many more people out there needed him and his organization, but with determination and the support of those around him, he knew he could face any challenge. When the event ended, Liam stood alone in the park, feeling the gentle sunlight on the familiar scene. He smiled, knowing that he hadn't just fought for himself, but had paved the way for many others. He had overcome fear, conquered injustice, and now he was ready to continue his journey with unwavering determination and hope. Liam's journey wasn't over, but he knew he had found his true purpose in life: to create a fairer world where everyone is respected, no matter who they are or how different they may be. He would keep moving forward, and nothing could stop him now. Thank you for following Liam's journey. If this story has inspired you, please subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more meaningful and heartfelt stories. We'll continue bringing stories of courage, justice, and resilience as we work together to create a better and fairer world. Hit subscribe and follow our channel to spread positivity.